we are going to do a never too early top 25. It's time to look into the crystal ball and talk. Oh, that's actually the wrong prompt. See, I'm typing things out. Little bit of a look ahead spot right there. But college football fans, it's never too early to rank the best teams in the country because there's only the preseason. There's never the offseason. The word offseason does not even exist, and I follow Josh Pate in that regard. So let's dive into my top 25 teams for the 2025 season. From the most recent success stories like Ohio State, Texas, Notre Dame, and Penn State, to potentially returning powerhouses like Alabama and Michigan that had some down years, to a dark horse candidate for playoff success or maybe just winning 9 or 10 or 8 games like Louisville, Nebraska, South Carolina, although maybe they're not a dark horse anymore because they have a whole lot of talent and kind of popped off in 2024. We're breaking down who's set to compete for a national championship, for a conference championship, for finishing inside the top 25, for maybe earning a big win, or maybe surprising us all and exceeding our expectations. So sit back, relax, grab a snack, popcorn, or just relax and listen and watch the whole thing through because we're going to be covering contenders, pretenders, and surprise risers for 2025 in this way too early top 25. Or perhaps I should say never too early top 25. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell if you haven't already. Comment your thoughts down below. If you want to support the channel, the links to the Patreon page and merchandise store are in the description or pinned comment. And I would highly advise you to join our Discord server via the link in the description or pinned comment where we talk college football 24/7. Also, finally, make sure to hit the bell because you'll get notified when we go live Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. But I want to kick this off, starting off with number 30, Boise State. Boise State's coming off of a college football playoff appearance, and I think they can make another one as the auto bid for the highest-ranked Group of 5 conference champion. That's because, yes, they lose Ashton Jeanty, but they return Matt O'Madsen, much of their offense, and in particular, 4 starters on the offensive line, and they do bring a hefty amount in their defensive backfield, and I think their staff's rather underrated. Up next at number 29, we have the Michigan State Spartans. I love Jonathan Smith. I love their staff. I think it's one of the better staffs in all of college football, actually. I just think that they got handed a Mel Tucker caliber roster. I believe in Aiden Childs. I believe in Nick Marsh. I think they've done a good job through the portal, bringing in offensive players in particular, especially on the offensive line. And Joe Rossi, I think, does a good job on defense. He improved Michigan State's defense drastically last year. Who's to say it won't improve again in year 2 of his system? At number 28, we have SMU. The Mustangs do lose an incredible amount of players, especially on defense, but they do return Kevin Jennings. Before they joined the ACC, were one of the better Group of 5 teams at getting high-caliber recruits. We saw them almost get Keon Russell, who was committed to them for quite some time as a high-caliber quarterback that Alabama eventually picked off. But I do trust Rhett Lashley. I like the staff that he has. I think they're an underrated team in terms of talent. And Kevin Jennings, speaking of talent, is a talented quarterback that I think just had more of a bad day at Penn State than anything else and faced a really aggressive defense. He's a good QB with a high ceiling. At number 27, we have the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Nebraska is a team that I want to be higher on, but I do have some questions about them. Nonetheless, this is a huge step forward from where they have ever been in really the past decade, if we're being honest. I think that defensively they lose a lot, and they'll regress, probably have the worst defense of the Matt Rule era, but they'll easily have the best offense because Dylan Raiola is in his second year. I think that a player like Ja'Cory Barini Jr. is going to have a phenomenal sophomore year after a great true freshman season, a breakout season. They've gotten players like Dane Key and Elijah Pritchett from the transfer portal, and they got the Sun Belt Player of the Year on defense, and they're just using the portal a lot. They're retaining some critical starters, and they're recruiting at a high level, and Rule in year 3 is a kingmaker, so watch out for Nebraska. At number 26, we have the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa loses a ton. 2024 was supposed to be their year when they were top 5 in returning production. Instead, they went 8-5 because the reality is you can't win all your close games every single season. And they still had some warts on the offensive side of the ball that held them back. But they do return Brendan Sullivan. They return, I believe, center Logan Jones. I think they return him. But they finally put together their offensive line this year, which was one of the best in the country. On defense, they bring back a player like Aaron Graves, for example. They have talent defensively. Phil Parker's a wonderful defensive coordinator. I don't know if they'll be one of the best teams in the country, but I still think they'll go bowling, and they could easily be a top 25 caliber team, especially because with all their wide receivers coming back, much of their tight ends, they have a running back room that's deep, and Tim Lester's in year 2 of his system. I think this will be the best Iowa offense since 2020 or 2019, better than any of the prior 4 offenses for sure. At 25th, we have Florida. Florida has DJ Lagway, a bunch of recruiting classes. They upgraded at DC by promoting Ron Roberts and kind of kicking Austin Armstrong to the curb. I think they'll be top 25. Do I think Billy Napier's a good coach? No. Do I think he is absolutely atrocious and terrible? Well, maybe, but I wouldn't go quite that far, and recruiting does matter. I think it's overrated on this channel, but that doesn't mean that I believe it doesn't matter. It does, and DJ Lagway's the reason why. If not for him, I would not have Florida anywhere near this list. But they have him. They bring back Eugene Wilson. They have some good offensive line players, and I think they'll be better on defense next year, in part based off returning production and other factors. So Florida's at 25th. Oklahoma's at 24th. This one I'm skeptical on, but again, this is a very early, way too early, or if you want to be a purist, never too early list. This will be subject to change in the next 2 weeks. In fact, in that time frame, there might be a new top 25 video out, depending on how much time I have and how classes are going. But anyway, Oklahoma brings in John Mateer. They return a lot on defense. They return a lot on the offensive line, too, and Deion Burks should be healthy. So I just think they'll be a little bit better than they were last season. At 23rd, we have the Minnesota Golden Gophers, who they bring back Darius Taylor. I think A.J. Turner is the name of the man they got from Marshall, name of the kid they got there at running back. He was phenomenal with the Thundering Herd. Their offensive line returns some production. They lose Daniel Jackson at wide receiver and defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman to Miami. But they also return a lot on defense, like Coy Parrish, safety, was a freshman All-American. He's going to be phenomenal for them. I just think that PJ Fleck has a good culture. They're well-conditioned. They're strong. This could potentially be that final breakout year for Minnesota, much like they had in 2019. At 22nd, I have the USC Trojans. USC's defense should be one of the better defenses in the Big Ten, based off of what they brought in through the portal, what they're returning as well. Like, they're returning Eric Gentry, for example. They got Keyshawn Silver in the portal, and they're bringing back Anthony Lucas, who was pretty incredible under DC DeAnton Lynn, and they've retained a lot of their assistant coaches there too. The issue with USC is how much they lost to the portal and also to the draft on offense, mostly to the portal, but also they lost Jonah Monheim, a pretty good center, to the draft. If USC's offense can be what it has been under Riley in 22 and 23, or what Riley's offenses were at Oklahoma, this can easily be a top 10 team, if not a top 5 team, based off of how I view the defense. But the offense has a lot of question marks. At number 21, I have BYU. BYU returns a lot of production as well. I think Jay Hill's a defensive mastermind. Kalani Sitake is a coach that I have liked for a long time. I sold my stock on him in 2024. I regret that, of course, because they went 11-2, had a very successful year, but they bring back a lot on a variety of positions, including quarterback Jake Retzlaff, who, man, talk about an up and down quarterback, but then also talk about players like Parker Kingston, for example, who was just awesome as a returner. And it's a well-coached team with a good culture, and they return plenty of guys. So that's why they're in the top 25. Tennessee is 20th. We're finally breaking in to the top 20. The Tennessee Volunteers return Nico Imaliava. They got Sam Pendleton, an offensive lineman from Tennessee, in the portal. They return players, I think, like at running back behind Dylan Sampson. And on defense, they do lose a ton. But mainly we're talking about Nico Imaliava, The fact they haven't used the portal a ton, but selectively to improve certain positions. Tennessee is a bit of an unknown for me, especially right now. You know, they lose James Pierce Jr. They lose Dylan Sampson, for example. I believe they bring back Miles Kitselman. Correct me if I'm wrong. Again, very early list. The depth charts are not all set, although really yesterday or 2 days ago at the time of this recording, they got set. But that's not enough time for me to pour through all of these, which, again, this list will be updated. But Tennessee is kind of in that area where I feel uncomfortable putting them anywhere. I'd feel uncomfortable leaving them out. I wouldn't even leave them out, but I'd feel uncomfortable putting them top 20, top 15, top 25. They could be anywhere from top 5 to like just outside the top 25, in my opinion. Very high ceiling, very high floor for the Tennessee Volunteers. At number 19, we have Louisville, and I will just keep it short and I will keep it simple because they lose a ton. They also bring in a ton through the portal. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is Miller Moss is a good QB. And reason number 3 is Jeff Brohm times Miller Moss is a match made in heaven. That is a college football marriage. And for that reason alone, I think Louisville, along with what they've done in the trenches on both sides of the football, I think is going to be a pretty good team in 2025. At 18th, we have Ole Miss. Ole Miss loses Walter Nolan. They lose Jared Ivey, Princely Unman-Malin. They bring in his younger brother, though, from Nebraska, Princewell Unman-Malin. They lose Trey Amos. They lose much of their O-line. And they lose Jackson Dart. But I think Kiffin has done a good enough job developing and recruiting and using the portal to where I'm going to give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt through the portal. And I think the players he's recruited out of high school have been developed enough, especially on the offensive side of the ball, to where I think they're still going to be a good team next year. Will they be top 5 in power ratings or top 10, top 15 at the worst? I think they might be a little bit worse than that. But I think Ole Miss can make the college football playoff next year if they don't just lose to Kentucky or Florida type teams. Like they have to find a way to treat every game like it is a Super Bowl. If they do that, then Ole Miss, I think, can definitely make the playoffs in 2025. At 17th, we have LSU. LSU, if they didn't use the portal a ton, I would put them even lower than this because I don't like Brian Kelly, and I think they have some questions on their staff overall outside of Bo Davis, who I think is a legendary D-line coach. They lose Will Campbell. They lose players on their O-line. Garrett Nussmeier comes back, though, and I think that with the development they have at receiver, the recruiting that they have done on both sides of the football, the effort they've put in, I think that this is a team that could reach the playoffs. I don't think they're exactly capable of winning the SEC in my mind. The reason they're above like Ole Miss and Tennessee, for example, is because I think they have a higher floor with all the good transfers they brought in, like Josh Thompson, for example, and like Jack Pyburn from Florida. And there are others. Oh, Michael Van Buren, who I think is a great addition for the future at QB. But their ceiling, I question it a little bit. A&M's a team, though, whose ceiling I don't really question. Great portal class. They return Marcel Reed. As of now, they're bringing in Micah Hudson. And I think that Mike Elko's a genius. I think that defensively, there's going to be a lot more building to do off of what was a good unit, but not a great unit on the defensive side of the ball from 2024 to 2025. They were a team that was just a few steps away from finally breaking through that kind of 8-9 win glass ceiling that many joked about Jimbo Fisher establishing there. But it is year one. I really trust Mike Elko. I think you all should trust Mike Elko as well, and Colin Klein, who's a wonderful offensive coordinator. At 15th, we have the Illinois Fighting Illini. Illinois, I think, is a team to pay attention to because they return 18 starters from their roster in the Citrus Bowl, where they beat South Carolina. Luke Altmaier is back. Much of their offensive line is back. Gabe Jacas is back. Much of their secondary, linebacker core, everything. And their coordinators, Barry Looney Jr. and also Aaron Henry, are back. And they've been building through the portal, through recruiting, just slowly. They went 10-3 this year. There's a chance they could get 11 wins next year. Pay attention to Illinois. At 14th, we have the Arizona State Sun Devils. They return Sam Leavitt. Cam Scadaboo is gone, but they return Leavitt and a bunch of other starters. And I think Kenny Dillingham's building something special there. And Leavitt was top 15, top 10 QB by QBR in 2025. And their schedule, once again, is pretty easy. So they can build momentum, and with the new playoff structure, they can make a mistake or perhaps two and reach the playoff. And I think that they are going to be better than they were last year, given all that they return. At number 13, we have the South Carolina Gamecocks. They return Dylan Stewart, who was, phenomenal at defensive end. They bring back Lenora Sellers, Nick Harbor. They have used the transfer portal pretty well. And I think that their talent profile continues to level up to a point where, look, they can beat Alabama next year. They can reach the playoffs. They maybe could win the SEC because Lenora Sellers, as the year progressed, really was that good. And they have, like Harbor and Stewart, nearly forgot his name. They're freak athletes. And they have freak athletes at other positions too that we probably don't know about yet. So this is a good team. It's why I have them at 13th. I just don't have them higher because they lose a good amount on their O-line and D-line, and I don't know how I view Shane Beamer as an X's and O's coach. Speaking of an X's and O's coach, we got Alabama at 12th with Kalen DeBoer. The only reason I don't have them higher is they lose Jalen Milroe, they lose Justice Haynes, they lose Elijah Pritchett, they lose not Caden Proctor, but Tyler Booker on the offensive line. They lose, for example, CJ Dupree at tight end. Defensively, they lost Jaheim Otis to the portal, who I think was a rotational player. They lose, I can't remember all the names, sadly, for Alabama, but they lose a lot. They lose a trusty linebacker, a set of linebackers, actually, and I just think that Kalen DeBoer is installing his system. He might need time for that, and I don't know what the QB situation is. I don't. I don't know if Ty Simpson is ready. I don't know if Austin Mack is ready. You could say the same with a lot of teams in front of Alabama, though. I think Alabama is anywhere from a top 15 to the best team in the country. I'm just a little bit low on them based off of how Michigan really bullied their starting O-line with their backup D-line. That's concerning because Michigan's backup D-line might be the best in the country for 2025. It's not generational like their 2024 unit is, and schools like Georgia, Texas, South Carolina, and a lot of Big Ten playoff caliber teams will have a level of D-line that Michigan will probably have this season and what they showed in the ReliaQuest Bowl. So that's concerning, I think, from an Alabama standpoint. At 11th, this is my first kind of shocker team. I have Georgia Tech. I just want to introduce you to the fact that Haynes King's a top 10 quarterback when healthy. Georgia Tech had a top 10 rushing offense. Tyler Santucci brought up the defense 20, 25 placements in year one. Imagine what he could do in year two. And they've been recruiting at a high level, developing at a high level, and Brent Key has a winning record against top 10 teams. So with that in mind, I think Georgia Tech's going to have a really good year. They could win the ACC. They could reach the college football playoff. And that's enough said. Just got to keep it short because I think Georgia Tech's going to be a very sweet team this year. At number 10, we have Michigan. This is mainly for the reason that where Michigan loses production, tight end and D-line, they're going to have a drop-off, but they have depth there. I'm talking about Rayshon Benny stepping up at D-tackle. Derek Moore comes back. I think that the secondary and linebacker core got better as the year went on. And Bryce Underwood's also as close to you can get for a true freshman alien at QB. And combine that with a lot of returning production at quarterback and a running back room and wide receiver room that has questions, but should be, in terms of wide receiver, better than last year, running back close to what Michigan had in 2024. I think Michigan's poised for a bounce-back season. Now, I will say, in comparison to a team like Alabama, I don't think Michigan has the same ceiling that Alabama does. Michigan's floor is probably lower than Alabama's as well. So again, there's a lot of changes that can be made. I don't think Michigan can win it all in 2025. I don't. That would genuinely shock me. In fact, any team on this list outside of Alabama and USC that we've talked about so far, I don't think can win it all. I think only those two teams, maybe South Carolina, and then after South Carolina in the third tier of can they win it all before we get to the top 8 teams. Maybe Michigan, maybe A&M, maybe LSU or Ole Miss. I don't think many others can win it all. It's a lot more wide open, the national championship is, compared to years past, but still is a pretty exclusive club. Indiana is a team that I do like. They're a team that I like. And I believe that with Curt Cignetti, all things are possible. And they bring in Fernando Mendoza. They bring in Roman Hemby. And I believe that they're going to drop off a little bit. But at the end of the day, with Cignetti's coaching, with his coordinators, with his staff, and a workable schedule, I believe that they are going to be like a good team again. So pay attention to Indiana in the future with an elite staff, and I think one of the nation's better QBs, a good running back in Hemby. They return Elijah Surratt. They return Michael Kamara, D'Angelo Pons, Omar Cooper Jr. They return a lot of good players. At 8th, we have Clemson. Clemson returns, well, Garrett Riley as OC. They bring in Tom Allen, an upgraded defensive coordinator in my mind. They return Cade Klubnik at quarterback. And a lot of players at wide receiver, O-line, defense, like Peter Woods, for example, and Avion Terrell at corner. They're going to be a good team in 2025. I think they're going to take a massive step forward. This is really the first team inside the top 10 where I'm going to confidently say they can win it all. Number 7 is Oregon, another team I'm confident can win it all. Oregon loses a lot of players, Dylan Gabriel, Jordan James, much of their O-line, almost their entire starting defense. No, correction. They lose their entire starting D-line outside of Mateo Uriungale, their entire defensive front outside of Mateo Uriungale, and much of their defense. And with Tosh Lupoi, after that Rose Bowl, after the Big Ten Championship game, I think defense is a big question mark for Oregon. That's why I don't have them top 5. But they're recruiting at a better level each and every year. I think Dante Moore has wild upside. Dakarian Moore, true freshman wide receiver they have coming in, he's someone to pay attention to as someone who, I'm not going to say will be Jeremiah Smith, because Jeremiah Smith's insane, but he could be as close to Jeremiah Smith as you can get within reason for Oregon next year. Evan Stewart comes back, and they return Kenyon Sadiq at tight end and Noah Whittington at running back, and they've recruited and developed well in the O-line. So I think offensively with Will Stein, they'll have no problem. The question for how high Oregon can shoot is what happens with their defense. Number 6 is Miami. Miami's actually ahead of Oregon because I believe in their defensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman, more than I do Oregon's Tosh Lupoi. And I also think that Shannon Dawson is pretty close to Will Stein. I make that comparison because Cristobal, of course, used to coach at Oregon. Both of those schools recruited a high level on the O-line and also the D-line. For Miami, Reuben Bain Jr. comes back. Carson Beck comes in at quarterback from the portal. I think that the Hurricanes are going to finally make the playoffs. I'm going to give a little bit of a spoiler here in 2025, and they could easily win the ACC. At 5th, we have the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia only brings back, I think, a total of 9 starters, but they've had so many injuries that I think they are going to have more experience than a team that would return only 9 starters, at least typically. They also have the consensus number 1 recruiting class for like the past 3 years, basically. So I think that talent-wise, they'll be fine. Kirby Smart's a great coach. Glenn Schumann's a great DC. I believe that Gunnar Stockton, with further training, will do better. And remember, they brought in Zachariah Branch at wide receiver and a kid from Texas A&M, who I think is going to be pretty good. So, who was very good, correction. And I think at Georgia will be just as good. So, pay attention to Georgia. I think that Georgia is a team of very high ceiling, very high floor. They're, no matter what, I think going to be a top 10 team. The question is, can they win it all? Number 4 is Ohio State. And Ohio State would have been higher than this, number 3, number 2, number 1, if not for the fact that they're losing the vast majority of their offense, defense, and also they're losing their best staffer, Jim Knowles. Ohio State, though, is still going to be a national championship contender with Ryan Day as their head coach, Julian Sayin at quarterback, who I think is going to have an awesome redshirt freshman season. Jeremiah Smith is back. Carnell Tate is back. The interior of the O-line is back. They're bringing Max Clare at tight end. And on defense, they're too deep. It is coached by Jim Knowles for 3 straight years, coached by Larry Johnson, James Laurinaitis, and Tim Walton and Matt Gurari for several years as well. So I think they're going to be just fine in terms of their ceiling. The question is, how low is their floor and how consistently can they hit their ceiling? Like, can they hit their ceiling the same way they did in 2024? I don't know, but we'll have to figure that out. At number 3, we have the Texas Longhorns. Texas, also like Ohio State, loses a ton, though they do bring back more in the defensive backfield. They've recruited a much higher level and developed at a better level than Ohio State has in the offensive line. They return Ryan Wingo at wide receiver, and they've recruited and developed at a high level there. They lose Gunnar Helm at tight end. They bring back C.J. Baxter, who was injured for the entirety of 2024, along with Contravion Wisner, who was healthy. So their running game should improve. And I think that Arch Manning with mobility should help them get to more of a 2023 level run game. And Manning in passing didn't have the experience of Ewers, but you certainly see that he has the same upside that Ewers does. So Texas is a team that I believe in under Sark, at least for being like a perennial or an annual contender. That game between Texas and Ohio State in week 1 is going to be very fascinating, guys. At number 2, I have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Notre Dame returns much of their defensive backfield outside of Xavier Watts and Jack Kaiser. They do lose the entirety of their D-line, though, so that's something to pay attention to. They bring back much of their starting offensive line. They return a lot of their starting wide receivers, and they bring in Malachi Fields from Virginia, who nearly had 1,000 yards. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price both come back. They have a deep QB room, and I think Riley Leonard might actually have an additional year of eligibility, though I'm uncertain about that. Plus, another year under Mike Denbrock isn't going to hurt. Another year under Marcus Freeman with his elite recruiting and development isn't going to hurt. I'm curious, much like Ohio State, to see who Notre Dame replaces at DC, but I still think that this year, only 1 year removed from elite defensive coaching, those defenses will be fine. Notre Dame is included in that. And for number 1, the Jim Knowles hire really solidified this. Penn State's my number 1. They're my national championship pick as well. The Nittany Lions are. I think that even with the questions that James Franklin has, and they're big, and I hate doing this. I hate picking James Franklin to win things. I liked it in 2024 because, you know, they made the Kolnicki hire, Aller was in his second year, and they had alien players. But with another year of James Franklin not breaking through, it makes it very hard for me to pick him again. But I think it's the most logical choice. They return the most production. They bring back much of their defense and almost all of their offense and offensive line. They return as much as you can at tight end when Warren doesn't have any eligibility. They return 2 NFL running backs, a potential future first-round NFL QB. Kolnicki will be in his second year. And Jim Knowles, look, Knowles has commanded several elite defenses. I know that his defenses typically take time to implement. The point is Penn State's not broken defensively. They're only 2 years removed from Manny Diaz. Tom Allen was not perfect, but he also didn't do the worst job in the world, and Penn State's recruited and developed at a high level on the defensive side of the football. So I think that many of the teams on this list, no duh, will reach the playoffs, specifically the teams in the top 10 for the most part. And I think that at the end of the day, it's going to be your top 4 teams, Ohio State, Texas, Notre Dame, and Penn State. Unless they play each other, those are going to be your semifinalists, in my humble opinion, because that's how it functioned this past season. That's how it functioned really the years before that, with rare exception, is the team that is just straight up better wins in college football. This is not college basketball. This isn't the NFL. This is college football. So I think that your most likely national champions are going to come from Penn State, Notre Dame, Texas, Ohio State, and Georgia's kind of like that team who's teetering on that top 4 that could win it all as well. But I'm siding with Penn State to win it all, and that's my top 25 plus 5 right there. The first one for the 2025 college football season. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And also hit that notification bell so that way you can get notified when new content from College Football with Sam drops. I appreciate you very much, and also share the video around to others who you know enjoy the sport of college football and love it as I do and as you do, and comment your thoughts down below so that we can have a conversation, because I want to know what you are thinking. And join our Discord server where we talk college football 24/7 via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Thank you to my Heisman Patreon members, Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, and Conlo OH. Thank you to my All-American Patreon members, Chris Lane, Ismar, and Tyler Nye. And thank you to my All-Conference members, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus. Make sure to check out my merchandise store and or Patreon page, or super chat down in the comment section below to support the channel. The Patreon page and merchandise store links are in the description or down below in the pinned comment. I hope you have a wonderful day. It is December, so Merry Christmas and also Happy New Year. I will see you guys soon.